Okay, let's dive into this. Have you ever wondered how your body manages localized emergencies, like a paper cut, an unexpected allergic reaction, or a sudden dip in blood pressure, without having to wait for command from the brain? Welcome to our explainer on Autacoids. Today, we're exploring the microscopic local chemical signals that are secretly running the show in our daily lives. These are the unsung heroes, and sometimes the hidden culprits behind everything from your mood to your allergies.
Here is our roadmap for this explainer. We'll kick things off by defining what Autacoids actually are. After that, we'll introduce our cast of characters: serotonin, histamine, bradykinin, and the eicosanoids.
Let's start with part 1, meet the Autacoids. I actually like to think of them as the body's molecular post-it notes.
The word Autacoid comes straight from Greek roots meaning self-remedy. Basically, these are biological factors that function a lot like local hormones. But unlike neurotransmitters, which are pre-synthesized and just sitting in vesicles waiting for a signal, Autacoids are mostly synthesized on an on-demand basis. When a local issue pops up, the surrounding cells immediately whip up these chemicals to fix the problem right then and there.
So what's the real difference between an Autacoid and a classic hormone? Well, think of classic endocrine hormones as global television broadcasts. They're secreted by specific, specialized glands. They travel all the way through your systemic circulation, and they send a message to the entire body. Autacoids, on the other hand, are strictly local. They're synthesized on demand by almost any cell and do their job right next door to where they were created. They're literally localized post-it notes left for neighboring cells to read and react to.
Moving right along to section 2. Let's talk about serotonin, the mood and motility regulator.
Now, what's really fascinating is where serotonin actually lives. We always hear it called the happy chemical in the brain, right? But get this, over 90% of the serotonin in your body is actually produced by enterochromophobin cells located right in your gut. While a small fraction is synthesized in neurons to regulate your mood, appetite, and sleep, its main day job is acting as a blue-collar manager for your digestive system, controlling contraction, tone, and peristalsis in your stomach and intestines.
Serotonin pulls off this massive variety of effects by plugging into different workstations, known as receptors. You've got 5-HT1 handling anxiety and vasoconstriction, while 5-HT2 manages platelet aggregation and smooth muscle contraction. 5-HT3 is pretty wild because it controls the emesis or vomiting response, and 5-HT4, that's the one driving the gastrointestinal motility we were just talking about. Depending on which receptors serotonin binds to, it completely alters your body's physiological response.
Because serotonin is so deeply involved in mood and psychiatric conditions like depression and anxiety, medical science has found some incredibly clever ways to manipulate it. Normally, after serotonin is released into the synaptic space, 90% of it is quickly vacuumed back up into the neuron, a process called uptake 1. Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs, are a major class of antidepressants that block this exact process. By blocking uptake 1, they indirectly increase both the amount of serotonin and the time it spends hanging out in the synaptic space, totally amplifying its effects.
All right, on to section 3. Here we have histamine, the body's ubiquitous alarm system, famous for alerts and allergies.
Histamine is an amine-based Autacoid found everywhere in nature, but in humans, it's heavily concentrated in mast cells and basophils. It's synthesized when the amino acid histidine is converted by the enzyme histidine decarboxylase. But it doesn't just slowly leak out. A major release happens via degranulation. When an allergen enters your body, it binds to an antigen IgE complex on the high-affinity receptor of a mast cell. That triggers the cell to essentially burst open and dump its stored histamine into the local tissue, blaring the alarm.
And just like serotonin, histamine has a very specific set of receptors. H1 mediates those immediate allergic reactions, inflammatory responses, and increased capillary permeability. H2 is busy triggering gastric acid secretion in the stomach. H3 is incredibly important in the central nervous system, particularly the hypothalamus, where it controls wakefulness, alertness, cognition, and memory. And finally, H4 handles immune cell chemotaxis.
This perfectly illustrates why targeted pharmacology is such a game changer. Think about H1 blockers, your standard antihistamines for colds and allergies. Because they block H1 receptors and sometimes accidentally cross over to block histamine's normal actions in the brain, like wakefulness, they bring about side effects like drowsiness. On the flip side, H2 blockers like ranitidine or famotidine specifically target the H2 receptors in your stomach lining. They reduce gastric acid to treat GERD and ulcers, but because they completely ignore H1 or H3, they don't make you sleepy at all.
Let's pivot to section 4 and look at a totally different kind of Autacoid, bradykinin.
often called the pain peptide. Unlike the amines we just discussed, bradykinin is a non-peptide, meaning it's cleaved from precursors called kininogens. But the absolute wildest thing about bradykinin is its incredibly short lifespan. It is rapidly degraded in just 30 seconds. The enzyme responsible for chewing it up so fast is called kinase 2, which is also famously known as ACE, or angiotensin-converting enzyme. But let me tell you, in those brief 30 seconds, bradykinin causes intense, burning pain, powerful vasodilation, and significant inflammation.
Bradykinin works its magic through B1 and B2 receptors. B1 is inducible during inflammation and mediates nociception, which is basically pain signaling. B2 is constitutive and handles cardiovascular and central nervous system functions. Now remember how ACE degrades bradykinin? If a patient takes an ACE inhibitor drug for high blood pressure, like lisinopril, it stops the degradation of bradykinin dead in its tracks. So the bradykinin builds up. This buildup actually helps the drug lower blood pressure, but it's also directly responsible for some notorious side effects, like a dry, non-productive cough and potentially dangerous swelling called angioedema.
Finally, we reach section 5, the eicosanoids. These are your master inflammation regulators.
Let's see how the body builds a massive, complex network from just one single source. Eicosanoids are lipid-derived autocoids produced by almost every single cell in your body. They all start from a shared membrane lipid precursor, arachidonic acid. Depending on which enzymes go to work on it, like COX or 5-lipoxygenase, this single precursor branches out into a huge family tree of powerful bioactive lipids, the prostaglandins, thromboxane, and leukotrienes. What's absolutely fascinating here is the microscopic push and pull dynamic constantly happening in your tissues to keep things balanced. Take thromboxane A2, for example. It strongly stimulates platelet aggregation and causes vasoconstriction. It wants to clot blood and narrow your vessels. But prostaglandin, or PGI2, does the exact opposite. It inhibits platelet aggregation and opens vessels up. Meanwhile, PGE causes vasodilation but also triggers severe contraction in gastrointestinal smooth muscles. It's a delicate, non-stop tug of war. Because eicosanoids heavily dictate pain, inflammation, and immune responses, they are massive targets for medications. When you pop an NSAID for a headache or joint pain, you are actually blocking the COX enzyme, essentially shutting down the assembly line for pain-causing prostaglandins. Leukotriene antagonists shut down the pathway that causes bronchospasms in asthma, and drugs like misoprostol actually mimic prostaglandins to protect your stomach lining. We do have to be careful though. Because prostaglandins help maintain renal blood flow, routinely using COX inhibitors like NSAIDs can unfortunately reduce blood flow to your kidneys.
We've seen how these local, on-demand chemical messengers regulate literally everything, from the serotonin managing your gut, to the histamine keeping you alert, the bradykinin causing you pain, and the eicosanoids balancing your inflammation. So here is a thought to leave you with. The next time you reach into your medicine cabinet for a standard NSAID for a headache or an allergy pill for the sniffles, ask yourself, which local messenger are you actually silencing? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the incredible chemistry happening right inside your own cells.